Welcome to the Soulful Surgeon Podcast with Dr. Lisa Hunsicker, a sanctuary for healthcare workers. In this space, we honor your stories, your struggles, and your triumphs. Here, you are more than your role. You are seen, heard, and celebrated. Join me as we explore conversations that nourish the heart, elevate the mind, and remind us why we chose the path of healing. This is your time. This is your place. This is the Soulful Surgeon Podcast. Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Soulful Surgeon Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Lisa Hunsicker. And as we've talked about in previous episodes, I've really discussed my thoughts about the 7 remedies of being. And these are all the things that we really need to pay attention to ourselves to help us be as authentic and really in contact with our own humanity, help us be more human beings and less doing machines. And so, as we talked about in the previous podcasts, talked about the remedies of being our physical being, our mental being, our spiritual being, as well as our sensory being. And then those are really the ones focused on us. But then the two that are our relational being and our community being, those have to do with who we are in relation to other people and how we're interacting and connecting with those people. And then finally, the 7th podcast will do about this, as we all talked about, is the intentional being. And this is really about what is your thoughts about what's your purpose? What are you trying to do? What do you want to achieve? Who do you want to be as a person in your community, in your relationships with your spouses, all of these things? It's all of our beings combined to one of like, what is the impact that we're going to make in this world? Now, today I really want to focus on something which I think is really key out of all of these, which is our mental being. And I think in healthcare, we've really struggled with this, and we really lack any sort of clear, concise way for us to really advocate for ourselves and our own mental health. We deal with it with our patients. And if we could just treat ourselves as good as we treat our patients, we'd be really having a step up. And one of the things that is really confounding this issue is this generational trauma, because we've been trained and we have really grown ourselves into these beings that are disconnected from ourselves and disconnected from everyone else to be able to endure our everyday life in healthcare. Now, this is military based, and so anyone who has any military background will understand how our training is, because it's very similar. But in addition to that, there can be other generational trauma that is maybe related to your own family. Maybe there's racial or cultural generational trauma in play as well, and perhaps all three. So we have to remember that we're coming into this with all kinds of baggage that we have brought with us. And we're very good at carrying it because we're trained to endure really, really difficult situations and to disconnect from our own heart. And that's something that we have to really get into a different place and a different space and mindset about. And I really do like to think about this as perhaps a shield, and a shield that we put up to help protect our hearts as we're doing these very difficult procedures. If you're a trauma surgeon and you're in the trauma bay and someone comes and they're shot in the heart, you have to act very quickly and you cannot react. You have to be very responsive and disconnected from your own feelings about that. Afterwards, though, we have to reconnect back to our heart so that we can really understand how this is affecting us and how we can take care of ourselves. But this really hasn't been the case. And so when we think about it, who's really asking physicians, nurses, all of the healthcare teams, who's asking about us? Who wants to know if we're okay? And remember that we're dealing with all kinds of very, very difficult situations. And the first and foremost, which all of us deal with in some aspect or other, is really dealing with patients and the very, very difficult situations that They come in, they're sick. Maybe it's a trauma. Maybe they've been shot. Maybe they've been stabbed. Maybe they've been in a car accident. And these are very, very dire situations. Maybe there's someone who's been up on the wards who's been doing just fine and all of a sudden has a cardiac arrest. And now we need an entire response team to try and resuscitate them. And maybe that's possible. And oftentimes it's not. And you go from this moment of just going about your day, and then all of a sudden this changes. And in a snap, you've got to be ready to go. And it's a really intense experience that we endure, and then we need to do something that's extraordinary to help them, and maybe that works out. But the other thing is in relation to patients, and this is something that we deal with certainly in the emergency department and up on the wards, and it's how the patient's family and the patient themselves treat us. And many times it's not pleasant, it's downright rude. Staff are bit, we've been spit on, we've been attacked. There's security that has to be put up. And really, since COVID, it's gotten significantly worse. And many times when you go into the hospital, there are actual signs now. And you would never imagine you would need a sign telling patients about how to behave, but there's a whole list of behaviors that basically says you cannot assault your care team. And this is just ridiculous that we have to endure this. And it's even more ridiculous that we have to have a sign to tell people that they have to treat the people who are caring for them in the most exceptional ways, that it's not okay to harm them. And then as a healthcare worker, you get to go to work every day and you walk in through those same doors and you get to see a sign that reminds you over and over again about what it is that you're about to experience. And there's no really good way to prevent that. You simply have to watch each other's backs and take care of each other. So we really have to work on these things. Now, some other things that we're dealing with is not getting paid. And if you're employed, maybe that's not as big of an issue, but if you're in private practice, that's a big issue. And perhaps the patients aren't paying, the insurance may not be paying. And the thing that people don't realize is that we have a business to run, and we're not exempt from rent. We're not exempt from all of the utilities. We need phones, we need internet, all of these things. We have to pay the staff. And the problem is that the expenses for all of these are going up, but reimbursement keeps going down, and patients don't necessarily want to take on their responsibility as well. And the other thing is manipulation by hospitals. And it's a very difficult situation because in some cases where maybe you're on a call schedule and you are working there, and maybe the hospital doesn't pay you and you're just waiting to get your paycheck and you've got to make your bills. But because it's not an employment agreement where the employees, have rights, as a contractor, you don't necessarily have that. And so maybe your call stipend hasn't been changed in 20 years and you need to negotiate that, but the hospital doesn't value you. And so there are so many things that we are enduring as healthcare providers, but who's checking in on us to make sure that we're okay? And this is part of the problem. We're not checking in with each other, and no one else is following up with us. Now, with all of this, it almost makes sense that there's some sort of anxiety. And this is so common, and fear is driving all of what we do. You think about it, if we don't figure out what's going on, that can harm a patient if you don't do the proper procedure, or maybe if you do a procedure that could harm a patient. Everything that we're doing, we're constantly weighing risks and benefits so that we understand what's the best outcome for the patient, but that doesn't always work out the way that you want it to. The other thing is that this is such a high intensity profession, and we're always in fear of making mistakes. And That can result in bad patient outcomes, but it can also result in lots of other things as well. You can be blamed for a poor outcome for a patient, even though you've done all the right things. And perhaps that outcome was going to happen whether you intervened or not. These are the things that we are worried about as healthcare workers. You could do your best and you could do extraordinary heroic measures, and still, whatever the process is going on, still may not make a difference. And that's really hard because you really want good outcomes for the patients, but we don't always get to have that. I think one of the biggest things that we deal with from every moment of our career is being sued. And everything that happens, the entire format of medicine has changed over the last several decades, and it has a lot to do with being sued. And everything that you do is under a microscope. And again, like I said, if a patient has a poor outcome, it may be nothing related to you, but you may have to go through a 2-year enduring assassination of who you are as a person to prove that you did what was best for the patient. But patients are angry, patients' families are angry, and it's a really difficult place to be. And we end up changing how we practice medicine so that we can defend ourselves in court and say, well, I knew this wasn't the problem, but I had to do XYZ to prove that that wasn't the problem. So in case I get sued, and the documentation that goes with all of that. So I mean, just imagine every moment of every day of your job that you're sitting there with someone sitting on your shoulder, scrutinizing, saying, I'm going to take you to court. I'm going to take you to court and I'm going to take all your money. I'm going to close your practice and I'm going to assassinate you publicly and all over the internet as well. And that's what we healthcare workers are dealing with. The other thing, again, online, it's very interesting. When I first started practice, this wasn't ever an issue, but obviously this has become quite common, and online reviews. And so pretty much most businesses have online reviews. The problem in healthcare is that we have something called HIPAA. And so this is to protect your privacy. And what ultimately happens in this scenario in healthcare is that the patients have carte blanche to tell whoever and whatever they want about their medical care. And they can be online, but we cannot. We cannot really discuss it at all. And so we're we're basically chained to having people harass us online, and we can't even respond. And then patients are coming to sites to look at us. If I'm at a hotel and someone writes a bad review, I still have the option of saying, yes, that's true, but you were crazy and you trashed my hotel and you broke these things. And so there's two sides to that, a rebuttal. But in medicine, we just have people who they just know that there's nothing we can do about it. All we can do is sit there and keep taking it on the chin. But we keep taking it on the chin over and over again, and no one's coming to help us. And legally, there's nothing that we can really do about it in the state of the law and the legal system right now. So, finally, one of the other things that we fear, and you may have seen this in the other episodes and talking about our kids and our spouses and our families. And, we wonder what they think about us when we're at work and we're doing all these things. And maybe we don't come home so nice. And we've dealt with all these other issues and all these fears and all these even potential assaults. Now we have to come home and then we have to be the mother, the father, the wife, husband, and we just have to show up and be present for our kids. And so we're always thinking about what is our family thinking about with us. So anxiety is huge in our daily world for all people. The other is depression. And when we're enduring all these things and we feel really terrible about it, well, what do we do? And who do we talk to when we're sad? You know, it's really difficult to talk to our colleagues because everyone is in the same boat. And time. We are all crunched for time. We are all going so fast because there's so much to do and we've got to get it all done. And many times it can't even possibly be done in one day. But we've got to keep moving forward. And so taking time out, when we're slaying our dragons and someone needs to talk to us about their dragons, a lot of times it's like, you know what, I don't have time for that. I don't have the bandwidth for that. And the problem is when we go home, if you're fortunate enough to be married to someone else in healthcare, this gets easier because you do have someone who perhaps can understand, and maybe they're in the same area of medicine or not, but they still have a general sense of what's going on. But in many cases, most people don't have that. And so to try and explain all this to your family, there's so much toxicity, right? And so we've experienced that. We don't want to just vomit all of this experience that we've had today. And so many times that just leads to not even talking about it, which I don't necessarily think is a good thing. I feel like we have to get to a place where we trust our spouse and understand that, you know what, they aren't going to be able to understand all the intricacies, and maybe they don't really need to, but maybe we can put it in short and layman's terms enough so that they get the emotional impact that it's had with us. But many people don't have that. And what about, when you're missing all these events too? You have all these funerals, weddings, graduations, all these things, and it's really sad. And it's difficult to try and explain to people why you have to be at the hospital. I think one of the things for me, a very difficult time for me, was during COVID, and where most areas in the public were shut down, in the hospital, things were still going. And many private practices were shut down as well. And so, as you all know, my wife, Krista, is a trauma surgeon. And so she does emergency general surgery. So that team went on and continued to go. And I went to the ICU and I worked in the ICU as well. And one of the moments when this first started, we knew this was really bad and people were dying. And we knew that at that time, our ICU had about an 80% mortality rate if you went on a ventilator. So we had this conversation. What happens if one or both of us dies and our kid, he's just a kid in high school. How is he ever going to understand? And who is going to explain to him why we chose to leave him to go to work? And I remember we both bawled in bed of like, what happens if we die? And and then we got up the next morning and then we went and did it. And fortunately, we're safe. But that wasn't the case for a lot of folks. And so who are we going to talk about with that? Because most people were sitting at home. And even now, when we talk about our experience through COVID, most of the conversations that I have with my colleagues and even our neighbors and our community folks, they have no idea. They're like, oh, we were staying home and we were getting upset because we couldn't go out and go do stuff, which was a very different experience for us. And so these are all the things that, we're dealing with all this depression, but what happens? What do we do? How do we deal with it? And how do we move through it? And who really cares about you? Who notices you? And who's coming for you? And right now, I feel like in medicine, no one's coming for us. It's up to us to really take care of ourselves. We're taught the game face, right? We come in and we're the heroes. And it doesn't matter what the situation is, whether it's a difficult situation that you're dealing with patients or even your own. And you're not going to cry in front of patients. You're taught game face, stoic, keep it all in it, keep it all inside, hide it. And you just have to be present for them. It's not about you. And it doesn't matter who you are, and you're not a human being. You've just got to keep going. Don't be weak. And anyone in healthcare is going to know these responses, right? So when you ask a healthcare worker when they're at work, how's it going? You're going to have one of three very common responses most of the time. And first one, of course, is when you have zero, zero, I'm fine, just fine, I'm fine. You doing okay? Oh, I'm fine. And that's, the translation is I don't have time to go through all the things that I'm going through right now. The other thing is, how you doing? Living the dream. And that is such a sarcastic way of saying, we're dealing with just really unpleasant things and this sucks, right? This is terrible. And so, when we see each other, it's very common in the OR. How's it going? Living the dream. The other one is, oh, just another day in paradise. And what we don't hear is like, I'm really struggling. I've got some difficulties. I'm having a problem. I need help. It's okay to say those things when it's related to a patient, but if it's related to you, well, I'm sorry, work is not the time and place for you. Work is for the time and place for patients. And the problem is that we can't disconnect from our own humanity. And this just keeps digging and digging and digging. So the next thing that we need to talk about, because when we have all this anxiety and we have all this depression and it's not dealt with and we just keep going and going, what happens with burnout? And the worst extension of that is suicide, and this is a problem that is rampant in healthcare. I can tell you personally, we have 3 physicians, all surgeons, who have died by suicide in this last year in my home city. And that's just me in my little world, and it's all over. And the problem is that everyone's starting to talk about it and like, oh, we're going to do all these burnout things. The problem is that when you hear, well, you just need to meditate more, take a hot bath, do yoga, go for a walk. All of those things are great and they are great stress reducers and they help manage you. But the problem is we're not dealing with any of the causes and the sources of this. And so right now, there's no solution to my problem. And so if I meditate more, I can't really meditate because I'm so upset about whatever, taking the hot bath, it doesn't make it any different that all of these other stressors are still present. And there's no one who is really actively working on trying to fix that. And so the problem is that this continues and this continues. None of our stressors are going away. We're not changing necessarily our exposure to them. We're not dealing with them in any particular way, perhaps. And maybe, perhaps now there's a new layer, and maybe there's an issue with our family. And maybe it's a marital issue. Maybe there's a divorce. Maybe there is a separation. Maybe there's a problem with one of your kids. Maybe they're ill. Maybe they have their own struggles. Maybe you have so much extra responsibility that that doesn't fit into your current work schedule and the demands that you have. The problem is that our family is our foundation. And so whatever is going on in our work, as long as our foundation is stable, we've got a good shot, right? At really doing a good job at really taking care of ourselves in some possible way. But when it hits you so deep in your core, you can't really disconnect from that. And then when you connect into everything all at once, it just becomes overwhelming. And the pain that you can possibly experience is deafening. And it's unsurmountable in your own mind. And so you're like, well, why is suicide a good idea? Well, it's a perfect idea, right? Because we have become black and white, all or nothing kind of people. And so this is going to stop the pain immediately. And I just can't go on for one more minute. And the problem is that we are tired and we're tired physically. Maybe we've been up for a 24-hour shift, maybe 48 hours. There's still some physicians who are taking 48-hour call, which still boggles my mind that that is even legal. And we need our medical societies to do something about that. But nonetheless, you're up, you're fatigued. Maybe you've done your 24-hour shift and you are sick and no one is sending you home because you're on call. You've got to be the one that's taking care of people. And so you are physically tired, you're physically sick, and you're emotionally just at your last, you know, at your wit's end. You can't go any further. And this, it just makes so much sense, even though it makes no sense at all. When you have sleep, you've eaten, you've had an emotional kind of purging of all this difficult stuff. And when you do that regularly, it keeps you healthy as a human being. But when that's not happening regularly, this is a real problem for us. And so we've taken this all or nothing in the hero approach to practicing medicine, but it also becomes our Achilles and can take us down. And I really feel like we have to work on that. And so the things I feel like we need to work on to help ourselves, this is the big thing, that we have to help our own self, but we have to help each other. And this is something that we really have to come together as a community, in the healthcare community. We have to take care of each other, and we have to literally give each other permission to go home. Take care of yourself. Go be with your family. You know, it just, when you have such traumatic events that can happen, you need somebody to just like spot you. I'm going to come in. Look, go home. I've got this. Just go home. You go take care of your family. I've got you. And the thing is that if we took care of ourselves and one another to the extent that we go, oh man, we go so hard for patients. If we could just do that for ourselves, this whole community would be in a so much better place. I love Jamie Kern Lima, and she has a great book called Worthy. And I invite all of you to really go. It's on Audible, so it's really great. As busy as we are, you can listen to it in the car, and that was really wonderful for me because coming and going back and forth to work, I could get through this book very quickly. But the thing I like to quote Jamie, because she says, "You are first, you are enough, and you are worthy." And I think this is something that we have been programmed through our military based training. And I know me and my surgical training, no one cares about you is the message that we get, and you are expendable and you are not worthy. And this is something that we have to take back, and we are worthy. And if we don't take care of ourselves, there's going to be no one left to take care of anyone else, and healthcare's going away. It's coming down. It's already in the process of coming down, and it's up to us. If we want to make a difference, we're going to have to save ourselves, and we have to turn the ship around and get it in the right direction, because this is no longer sustainable with the way things are at. And so, one of the things I like, we do this in the OR. It's called debriefing, and it's after each surgery we review, did we do what we said to do, and did we have any issues, and what was going on. I really feel like we should be doing that with all these traumatic situations. I think that the emergency department, all of the emergency teams, the trauma teams, I think interventional radiology experiences this to some extent. I think OBGYN and labor and delivery, anytime that there's any sort of emergent and high stakes procedures going on, I think that these teams need to debrief after each really difficult session. And we're going to have to build that in time wise. You're going to have to stay maybe a little bit longer. And at minimum, we need to do this after each shift, because we can unload this toxicity very concisely. We have the language that we all speak to one another that our families don't necessarily understand, but we also have, we can get right to the meat, and we don't need to sugarcoat it. We don't have to give a whole backstory. We can do that with one another. We need to stay after our shifts and we need to talk with one another and make sure that everyone has processed their days and had a chance to just drop that, because the thing is that none of this is ours, but we take it on as ours and we take it with us day after day after day, and it's just eating us alive and we're not doing anything about it. And what we need to do, we need to process it with our colleagues and we need to help one another. The other thing is we need to do counseling. This life is a hard life, and we're dealing with all these hard things in healthcare, but in addition, we have our own health. Maybe we're not even taking care of our own selves. We need to pay attention to that. Maybe our family's having health problems. Our parents are aging and they're dealing with health issues, and maybe they have dementia and they're healthy. And so that is a very difficult place to be. We've got to take care of those people, and it takes a lot of time that maybe we don't have. We have our relationships with our families, our kids, our parents, sisters, brothers, all of our significant others. And so I think that that's a hard job anyway. So the other things we have are finances, right? We're not immune. Nobody gives us a pass. They're like, oh, you don't need to pay taxes. You don't need to pay your mortgage. You don't need to pay your rent if you own your practice. So we have all these financial stresses as well. And so I feel like that we need to be checking in regularly. And if the universe is absolutely amazing, it's still worth going and celebrating with a counselor quarterly at minimum. And if you've got other stressors, you need to be doing this more regularly, because we need someone who cares, who is showing up for us, that they care about the outcome of us and they care about the quality of our life. And we need to have these conversations and we need to have an advocate. And this is that person. I think that we need to think about this as our foundation. And, we work in and taking care of patients. We're always trying to optimize everything in patients, and we understand that we may not get it perfect, and the patient's never going to be perfectly healthy. But all the things that we can optimize, we need to make it as best as possible, because it makes their overall recovery and their outcome better. We need to have that same approach with us, and we need to manage our foundation, because when that comes out from underneath us, it's like a house of cards and we drop, and this is where we get into burnout. This is where we get to feeling like suicide is a good choice for us. Another thing I think that we deal with is OCD and perfectionism. You know, I feel like we think that you have to have OCD to be a good doctor. And this is what it takes to be a good doctor. But the problem with perfectionism, we're criticizing each other. And we're not perfect. We are human beings and we're going to make mistakes. We have health issues. We can't make that perfect as much as we try. We'd love to. We like to do it for our patients, but it's just not possible. It's not an absolute all or none. And so I feel like we've gotten to the place where there is this constant criticizing, especially in the physician community. And we criticize each other. And there's no questioning or understanding, where's this other person? What's going on? You know what? I'm making this call to this surgeon who's been up for 23 hours, even though I've been on my shift for 4 hours. You know what? They're probably pretty exhausted. So they're going to be a little bit more snarky. I need to give them that grace. And maybe ask before you start anything, introduce yourself, because maybe you know each other, but a lot of times you don't know each other. Hi, this is Dr. Hunsicker. How you doing tonight? Before I start going to get to the point of like, hi, hey, how are you? Is there anything I can do for you? And we have to keep doing this with one another. And it's a total shift, because we're trying to be as efficient as possible. Our communication style is very, very efficient, and sometimes we need a little bit more. And I think that we just push each other and push each other and push each other. And it's interesting on Doximity, where you all probably are at, just like I am. There was an interesting commentary where there was a physician who wrote something about having pain, and it was a surgeon and operating, and many surgeons here will know and understand this, but if you're not a surgeon, you may not. And so the thing is, we are in these ridiculous positions, very awkward positions for hours and hours and hours at a time, for days, weeks, years, decades. And so, now when it's 30 years I've been doing this, I've already had neck surgery. I've got, back pain and muscle pain. My thumbs are killing me because they dislocate from using the forceps over and over again. So the thing is that we work through pain all the time, and our patients don't know this. Maybe our families, probably the person who knows it the most is the person who we go to sleep and wake up with, because they're the one. The noise. I always joke with my wife. It sounds like a haunted house when I wake up from all the creaks and the moans and groans of just being so stiff and trying to get up and get going in the morning from this. So, on Doximity, there was this physician, the surgeon, who was talking about it. And it was very interesting to me because it opened up the door for people to talk about how they feel about this. And so this just brought on, like, layer after layer after layer of people talking about all of their concerns and their struggles and their pains. And I found it very interesting that there was one particular surgeon who chimed in, and his response was, "Stop being a bunch of whiners. You're not manual laborers." And that is the problem. That's exactly the problem. You know what? I bet if that was their child, they'd probably be having a whole different conversation with that person. But it's with us, and it's all that same mentality of buck up, suck it up, turn your pain off, quit complaining, and get back to it. And I don't care about you. And this is something that we have got to change. We've got to get in, and we've got to be there for each other. And I think what this particular post was about, all of us, it gave the opportunity for many of us to talk about, here's the struggles that we have. And what we need ergonomics in the OR. So this becomes the next layer to moving forward to helping. And so that was completely ignored, and we were all just invalidated by our own colleague. And this is the thing that we have to be mindful of, and we've got to do better at. One of the things I think that we just, with perfectionism, we just feel like there's no room for error. People are going to die, and people are going to get hurt, and that's true. And the thing is that people are going to die, and people are going to get hurt without ever coming in contact with me or any healthcare workers. So that's the state of the world, and we're trying to insert ourselves in ways that hopefully makes that not be the course. But still, we're human. But we have this incredible belief that we are infallible. And again, this was another issue on Doximity where a physician wrote about perfectionism, and it was just like chumming the water, and it just turned into this feeding frenzy of, you need to quit, and you're not good enough, and if you don't think that you can do that, you have to quit and just go. And it was just nasty, and we cannot do that. And the thing is that we are human, right? So, one of my colleagues was doing a procedure, and she was carrying a skin graft. She was moving from one side of the table around the patient to the other side. And she slipped and she fell and she landed on her elbow. She saved the graft. Like, this is, sacrifice your body for the sport, right? You go down and you cannot contaminate that. And she breaks her elbow and she finishes the case, right? These are the things that we endure. And so But at the end of the day, her elbow was broken. She needed to have a surgery. And so that doesn't erase those needs. And so we have to be more mindful of that. And we have to give each other grace on that. And so when you get into this mindset, what happens when you do make a mistake? And you can't say that you won't, because we're human and it's going to happen no matter what. There's going to be a mistake that's made. There's no, where do you go from that? The only way out is to jump off the cliff, right? Because you have this whole mindset of I'm infallible and everything has to be perfect. But if it's a mistake, if we make the mistake, it just turns into self-loathing. And we talk about this all the time. There is no one that can make us feel more worse when there is a bad patient outcome than us. We beat ourselves up. Like, no one needs to take the stick to us, because the stick isn't even available because we've got it and we're doing it to ourselves. If it's with others, we don't reach out to them and say, hey, let's break this down and let's see, so that we can learn from this and this doesn't happen again. It turns into a criticism. And sometimes it's intentionally done to hurt people and humiliate them. I know in academic medicine, ICU rounds, at least for me, and many surgical programs, was awful. It was injuring people in front of an entire group for fun. And the whole idea was like, oh, well, you'll feel so bad about it, you won't make that mistake again. And you never came away from that experience having learned anything. What you learned was to keep your mouth shut and don't step up to try and talk about how you're going to treat this patient. Surgical morbidity and mortality conference is something that's very similar. Now, this has gotten better over the years, but not always. And so, but this is the style, right? This is what we've learned, and this is how we teach each other how to learn. And it's not about harming each other. And so, if you do this, you're going to get harmed, so you better not do that. It's like, this is the disease process, and this is what we need to be doing to avoid this, so that patients have better outcomes, because you have to bring that back to the patient. So, and we have to bring that back to us, and we don't really have that in some cases. I think of perfection is like this third addiction that we're just addicted to, and we can't get away from it, and almost prideful. But the thing that I like to think about, and I invite you all to think about this perhaps in a different way, that perfection is excellence without the ability to breathe and to pivot. And so the thing is, if things aren't going right, your perfection algorithm, it doesn't work. And what you have to be able to do is deliver excellent care, but you also have to be able to be flexible and stop, breathe. You're going from a reactionary, you know, experience to a response. I'm going to respond to this situation, not react to it. And I think that this makes us much better practitioners. And I think this helps us with one another as well. I think that fear, it is key in all of this. And we have to figure out how to do this. And I don't have an answer for this. And I would love for anyone who can help out with this. Please put something in the comments. Please write what kind of healthcare worker you are and what your suggestions are. But the thing that we have to talk about is fear of harming patients. We have to talk about fear of making wrong decisions. We have to talk about the fear of malpractice and getting sued. We have to talk about the fear of being publicly assassinated through malpractice, but also through online reputation management. And there's all these different firms. All they want to do is they want to take our money so that they can help go through and get more reviews and manage all of our reputation. We have to pay money to other people because we can't even respond to that. And so we need to reach out to all of our representatives and our senators and say, look, we are being creamed. And if they're going on and they are disclosing that they have a relationship with us, then perhaps HIPAA is no longer in play. And it gives us the opportunity to have an equal footing with some of these patients. I know that I've had people who have written bad reviews who have never even been to my practice. Some of them are friends of employees that were let go, and they just wrote all kinds of things. And, there's not much that we can do. And we can't call out people because it looks unprofessional. Of like, hey, you're so and so's friend who was fired. You can't do that. But the thing is, we have to be able to reflect our business in a professional way. But when people are really harassing us, we have to be able to defend ourselves and deal with that. This can be paralyzing. And I want to tell you about there was a surgeon in Florida, and this particular surgeon was involved in a malpractice lawsuit and had done a breast reduction, and unfortunately there was loss and necrosis of the nipple. And keeping this story very brief, the the patient got angry and the patient sued him. And so afterwards, they went through the suit, they went to court, and then the jury awarded her multiple millions of dollars. It wasn't like your 1 in 3 coverage. It was well, well beyond that. And this guy was publicly humiliated and assassinated, and he had everything basically taken away from him. He had worked his whole life taking care of people, and this was taken, and he went home and died by suicide. And he has a whole family who there's kids without a dad because of this. So we have to do something. We've got to do something. And finally, the last thing I want to talk about is death. And we have to learn how to deal with death. And I think that we are so shut off from death because we deal with death day in and day out. And all of these encounters over and over and over again, you get shielded and you get hardened from it and you get protected because it breaks your heart every single time. Even if it's in the emergency department and you have no relationship with that patient, it still breaks your heart every time someone dies. And then we deal with the family and their heartache. And so we have to do better at managing how we absorb that. And we have to remember that is not our death and that is not our family. And this was a difficult time and we need to shield so that we can deliver the care that we need. But we also need to come home and take that shield down. We need to feel that. We need to process that. We need to be present with our family and let them know because, you know, is Dr. Hunsicker there just being aloof and distant and appears to not really care when we're having our dinner conversation or, at the kids' activities? No, no, she's grieving for this experience that she's had. And so we need to be able to communicate that. I think we also have to think about what happens when there's a death in our own family or close friends and how that impacts us, and really being able to be present for them in a way that we are not physicians. We don't need to show up as physicians. We just need to go and be people. But when we go back to work, we need to let our colleagues know where we're at, and we need to really come together as a community to help check in because we all know that the death is a very difficult time and you get through that week, but it's the months that come afterwards where it's such a profound loss and we're feeling it, and we've got to be able to talk about it. And the people who we work with the most are really our other families, and so we've got to make sure that we take care of each other. And then finally, the one last thing we have to think about is what about our own death? And we are not immune to health issues, and we have to be mindful of that too. We are not impervious to life as we know it. And so hopefully we won't have to deal with that for a long time, and many of us never deal with it because it's a sudden, quick passing, and maybe sometimes you have some notice. You have the ability to make plans, but oftentimes many, many times that's not the case. And so I want you to take some time to really think about all of this. And I want you to reach out and call all of your colleagues who you haven't talked to in a while, people that you deal with day to day, your own teams. We've got to reach out and say, "Hey, how are you? Really? Not that I'm fine, living the dream, just another day in paradise. No, really, how are you?" And if they don't have a chance to talk, say, "You know what? I get it. You're totally swamped, but why don't you call me after work?" Send people a text so that they know that you're thinking about them. "Hey, you want to get together? Do you want to talk about anything? How are you? Hey, I know your mom passed a few weeks ago. I'm just checking in. How you doing with that?" You can reach out, and there's so many different touch points that we can give each other that just helps us feel like, you know what? Someone's got me. And because some days I don't got me. Someone's got to get me, and sometimes it can't be me. So is there anybody else? And the answer is yes, and we need to be that for each other. So thanks for listening to this. I think that mental health and healthcare is something that we've got to deal with. I think one of the difficult things as far as credentialing is concerned, we have things on our credentialing that asks, "Have you ever been, you know, having," they always want to know, "Do you have any mental health issues?" But these are criteria in the past that have been used to select people out. And really, we want this to be very inclusive, and we want it to be mindful of, are there any issues that you have that we can be supportive of? And I think we have to help change that landscape so that everyone is going to deal with some sort of mental health issue. And it doesn't mean that you necessarily have, a DSM diagnosis and needs to be hospitalized. It just means that we're living life together. We've got to hold each other, and we've got to keep each other safe. So please reach out to all of your friends and your colleagues in healthcare. Tell them how much you love them. Tell them you got them and whatever they need. And please take care of one another. Thanks so much. Thank you for joining me on the Soulful Surgeon Podcast. I hope today's conversation offered you reflection, encouragement, and a reminder that you are not alone on this journey. If this episode spoke to your heart, please share it with someone who might need it as well. And don't forget to subscribe so you never miss a moment of connecting with healthcare workers all over. You can find us on the web at soulfulsurgeon.com. You can find us on Instagram at Soulful Surgeon. And you can find us on LinkedIn at Lisa Hunsicker, MD. Until next time, take care of yourself the way you care for others. And remember, your story matters here.